Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I bring you 8 true stories from the shadowed hollows of the Appalachian Mountains, tales of silent watchers, shifting trails, and secrets best left buried beneath ancient trees. If you've ever sensed a presence just beyond sight, or heard your name whispered where no one should be, these stories are for you. If you enjoy these tales, consider subscribing and sharing where you're listening from. I'd love to hear your stories. Now, let's step quietly into the unknown. I was 51 when the station cam caught me writing in my sleep. Not muttering, not tossing, sitting upright at my desk, pen in hand, scrawling lines with the precision of a man fully awake. My name is Carl Hyun, and I've worked the Blue Hollow Ridge Post long enough to know the difference between a sleepwalker and a vessel. The first time I watched the footage, I felt a chill bloom under my ribs, not because I looked possessed, but because I didn't look disturbed. I looked calm, content, like I'd found something worth writing about. Deep in a part of me that shouldn't have survived the last few decades, I assumed stress at first. Old search and rescue cases can claw their way back through the skin if you let them. But when I opened my journal the next morning, there were 6 new pages written in a child's looping script. The date at the top read May 2nd, 1993. I felt the year hit me like ice water, because that was the summer we lost Peter Mallon, 11 years old, vanished along Devil's Fold. I was 30 then, still green, desperate to make a name. I remember the search more vividly than I do my own marriage, every detail preserved in memory like it refused to fade. But I never remembered Peter's handwriting. I never knew it. Until now. I flipped to page 16 and stopped cold. The paper was damp at the edges, curled with age and stained with something reddish-brown. I thought it was old blood at first, but when I rubbed it between my fingers, it had the grit of clay, rich, mineral-heavy, like the kind found deep in cedar wash. Problem was, cedar wash sits 40 miles east. Peter was never meant to be near that basin. And yet here it was again, his voice, his words, the slow unraveling of days leading up to his disappearance, told in a voice that sounded nothing like mine, but came from my own hand. That night, I left the journal locked in a fireproof box in the equipment shed. I even set motion sensors around the perimeter. But I woke up at 2:44 a.m. with the same cold weight in my hand, pen touching paper. Breath caught in my chest. I didn't remember sitting up. I didn't remember moving. But there I was again, writing. And when I checked the footage, the camera caught something worse, me whispering. No words, just rhythm, like a lullaby without notes. Jace, my assistant, saw it too. He didn't speak for a while afterward, just asked if I remembered the boy's full name. I didn't respond. I just pulled the journal close and flipped ahead. The next entry was dated the day before Peter vanished, and it mentioned things no one outside the Mallon family could have known. A chipped blue whistle, a fight with his brother about a pocket knife, the name of the hiding game they played on Sundays. I stared at the ink until it bled together. This can't be memory, I said out loud. This is intrusion. But what scared me more than the pages was the moment I caught myself nodding in agreement, like a part of me already knew. The dreams returned after that. Same ones I had in 93, the boy standing just out of reach at the tree line. Mouth moving, no sound, only now, I could read his lips. Write it down. He kept saying, or I'll be forgotten. The journal followed me everywhere. Even when I left it miles away in a locked vehicle, I'd find it resting on my cot come morning. Once, it showed up on the trail, placed neatly beside a cairn I'd never built. Open to page 16. Always page 16. That's when I noticed something worse. The entries weren't just about Peter anymore. They were shifting, including fragments from other cases, unresolved ones. A girl lost in 2001. A hiker who left no tracks in 1986. Names I hadn't spoken aloud in years. And yet, there they were, written in my hand, braided into Peter's timeline like they'd all been walking the same path together. Like the ridge remembered every missing step. I called an archivist I trust in the regional office, sent her a scan of one of the entries. She called me back that night, voice trembling. "This ink isn't modern," she said. "It's lampblack. And the phrasing, the sentence structure, it doesn't match your previous writing samples. It reads like a voice being filtered through something older." I didn't ask what she meant. I just thanked her, hung up, and turned the camera off for good. I didn't want to see what else I might be doing. Now I sit at the desk each night and wait. I keep the journal closed, hands folded, mind blank. Still, I wake to new entries. Still, I hear the scrape of graphite on paper while I sleep. The strangest thing is, I don't resist it anymore. I don't fight the pull. I just keep reading. Because the deeper I go, the more I believe it's not just Peter's story I'm telling. It's mine too. The version of me that never stopped walking those woods. The part that got left behind. And sometimes I wonder if these are my hands. Why do they remember lives I never lived? 3 nights ago, I found a map drawn in the back of the journal, rough pencil lines. Childlike, but precise. It traced a path through Devil's Fold I'd never taken. Not because I didn't know the terrain, but because that part of the ridge collapsed after the '93 storms. It shouldn't be accessible. But the map showed a clear trail leading to a grove, marked with a tiny cross. I followed it the next morning, not fully expecting to find anything. Yet halfway through the dead zone, I saw fresh indentations in the brush, as if someone small had moved through just hours before. Not animal, not recent storm damage, just footsteps that felt misplaced. At the grove, I found the tree, the same one I remember standing beside during that final search for Peter, where we called his name and waited for nothing to call back. Its trunk had split open since then, hollowed by rot or something older. Inside, tucked in the crooks of damp roots, was a small piece of fabric, faded blue, a fragment of a child's windbreaker. I didn't pull it out. I didn't need to. It was the same jacket Peter had worn when he disappeared. I'd seen it in photos. I'd written it down myself on the first report. And beneath that fabric, pressed flat into the soil, was another journal, smaller, stained with clay, bound in twine. I didn't open it until I was back at the station. My hands shook, not from cold, but from a feeling I hadn't known since the day after Peter vanished. A knowing. The first page wasn't written in his hand. It was mine. Older ink, but unmistakably mine. I tried to remember where I ended. It said, "But this place keeps writing new beginnings." The entries that followed matched nothing I'd written recently, but the voice was familiar. Desperate, fading. Asking questions I've only whispered when alone. Am I the one searching? Or the one still lost? Since then, the boundary between memory and writing has frayed. I find duplicates of old incident reports refiled in my cabinets, same wording. Different dates. Reports signed in my name. Describing searches I never conducted. Bodies I never found. Page 16 reappears every time I try to throw the journal away. Burn it, bury it. Lock it in a steel box, it still finds its way back to the station. Stained with fresh clay. Always open to the middle. Always showing a new fragment of Peter's story. Or mine. Or someone else's. The voices have begun blending now. Last night I heard knocking on the wall behind my desk. 3 soft taps. Then silence. When I peeled back the paneling, I found a small hollow between the insulation just wide enough for a child to curl into. And tucked in the corner was a whistle. Blue plastic, cracked down the side. I didn't touch it. I just closed the wall again and sat at my desk until morning. When I finally slept, I dreamed of myself, but younger, 30, breathless, shouting into trees that refused to echo. And then I saw Peter, his back turned, holding my journal, writing something into it with calm hands. Today, the camera caught something else, not me. The station was empty, no sign-in, no record of entry. But the feed showed a figure standing at my desk, hunched over the journal, shoulder blades too narrow for an adult. The timestamp flickered, the image distorted. When the frame cleared, the figure was gone. But the page left behind read he still doesn't know he's already gone. The district manager called this morning. Asked if I was ready to transfer, said I'd earned a break. I almost said yes. But then I looked out the window and saw footprints in the frost. Small, bare, leading from the tree line to the base of the station door. The journal was already on my lap, open, waiting. And I realized the question isn't who wrote these entries. It's who keeps reading them, who keeps passing them forward. There are names in the back of the new journal now. Names of rangers who vanished, hikers who disappeared mid-hike. Even a couple I thought had retired. Some are crossed out, some are underlined, and one at the very bottom is mine. Not Carl Hune, just Mr. H, a name I haven't heard since that summer, when Peter called out for me in the woods. I've stopped filing daily reports. I've stopped answering the radio. The ridge is quiet now, the way it gets when something is listening closely. The only sound is my pencil scratching across paper I don't remember placing. The journal's nearly full. I think it's almost time for the next one. I don't know who will read it, but if they do, I hope they understand some memories don't fade. They wait, folded in pages, buried in clay, whispered through the hands of men who mistake writing for remembering. And now, the final line writes itself. He vanished, trying to recall what never left. They assigned me to Cross Pine Tower in the fall of my 38th year, not long after the previous ranger left without a word. My name is Ellie Roan, and I specialize in perimeter monitoring trail shifts, fence failures, wind anomalies, the quiet stuff. Cross Pine's not a hard post on paper, just remote. The maps make it look tidy: one tower, one loop trail, a radio shed, and a clearing where the flagpole stands. But the first time I saw it, something felt wrong. There was no shadow, At first, I thought it was an angle thing, cloud cover. Early dusk. I waited for midday sun and checked again. Still nothing. The pole stood like a cutout pasted onto the world, untouched by light or wind. I walked around it. My own shadow curved across the gravel, bent with movement. But the pole, nothing. It didn't throw even a blur across the stones. The air around it felt slightly colder too, like it pulled the warmth down into the earth beneath it. On my third day, I set up a motion-triggered thermal camera aimed directly at the pole. At 2:12 a.m., the camera caught a heat signature, human-shaped, standing beside the pole for 13 full minutes before vanishing without a step or shift. The next day, I replayed the footage in slow motion. The figure never moved, but the air temperature dropped 7 degrees while it was there. The flag itself didn't flutter. That was another thing on full moon nights. The flag always flapped toward the wind, as if something reversed it. My compass began acting up too. I carried 2 1 analog, 1 digital. Both failed within the same 6-foot radius of the pole. The needles spun, stalled, then fixed on west no matter where I turned. And west meant the drop what we call the Long Ravine. It's not on public maps anymore. Some say it was cordoned off after a mudslide in '89, but the truth is, there's no official record of a slide. Just a note in an old ranger log that reads, "Avoid the line where wind forgets direction. The pole stands on that line." I started walking the loop each day, marking trees as I went. The trails seemed to shift subtly, nothing drastic, just bends where there hadn't been bends the day before. I'd returned to the tower with fewer notches than I'd made. At first, I blamed fatigue or laziness. But one afternoon, I found a marker I'd carved only hours earlier, already grown over with bark. That shouldn't happen, not overnight. I took photos, time-stamped everything. But the images changed in storage blurry edges. Data corruption localized to anything facing the flag. Then there was the night I came around the tower and saw myself, just for a second, half a second. Maybe. A figure with my same walk, same posture, circling the other way. I froze. When I looked again, no one was there. I checked the gravel. My boot prints overlapped. I circled again and again, trying to recreate the moment. But the loop pulled me tighter each time. I started to wonder if I'd ever completed a full lap, or if I'd just been circling variations of the same time. The radio offered no comfort. Static bled into the weather band during every full moon cycle. I tried calling base. My voice echoed back with a 1-second delay, just long enough to sound like a stranger. I stopped trying after that. There's something about hearing your own voice in the wrong cadence that makes the skin crawl, especially when it doesn't end the way you spoke it. I found a maintenance log in the base of the tower. Old, dated 2004, signed by someone named Ranger Roan. I don't have family in the service. I checked the archives. There was no Ranger Roan posted here ever, but the signature matched mine. Same pressure, same slant. I stared at it for a long time, then flipped to the final entry. It read, "Still circling. Still no shadow. Still not sure if I ever arrived." That's when the headache started. Always near the pole, like a pulse behind my eyes, vibrating through my teeth. I wore aluminum shielding once, just to see. The pain vanished, but so did time. I stood beside the flag for what felt like 10 minutes. My watch said 93 when I came to. My boots were soaked in dew, though the grass was dry, and in my hand was a folded scrap of old ranger stationery that read, "Turn around, count the laps." I'm not sure I ever stopped walking. I close my eyes now and feel gravel shift underfoot. I hear the low creak of a flag in windless air. I see shadows bending the wrong way, the ones that don't belong to me, but move when I do. I started keeping a lap count on my forearm in black ink. Just a tick every time I passed the south-facing window of the tower. First day, 5 laps, next 8. But on the third morning, I woke to 27 marks. I only remembered 3. And worse, the ink wasn't mine. Different pen, thicker line, notched in straight verticals like someone had been tallying for me. The part that really set my stomach turning was the slight smear on the last one, like it had been made while I was moving or sleeping. The pole hums now. I don't know how else to describe it. Not a sound, not exactly, but a sensation deep in the ribs, like tuning forks vibrating from beneath the ground. Some nights I feel it before I even open the door, like the air is already waiting. And on those nights, the flag doesn't just flutter, it lifts, full, upright, despite dead wind. The fabric points east and just holds there, tensioned like it's straining towards something or resisting something behind me. I submitted a falsified report to the district office, claimed a potential root rot near the ravine. Recommended trail closure for ecological reasons. They approved it without question. That's how I know this place doesn't show up right on their maps either. They want it sealed as much as I do. But I'm not sure I can leave now, even if I wanted to. I tried once, packed gear, locked up, walked due west. 5 hours later, I saw the tower rising ahead of me through the trees. Same angle, same clouds, same bird on the railing, like I'd never left. I opened the logbook yesterday and found a sentence I never wrote. Ellie Roan, confirmed 38th rotation. It wasn't typed. It was written in that same tall, clipped script I saw in the 2004 log. Signed by that other Roan. I flipped through the older pages again. New entries had appeared, woven between mine observations about weather, radio anomalies, but all skewed slightly. One said, "Remember your reflection." Another, "If the flag touches shadow, step aside." I didn't know what it meant until tonight, just after midnight. I saw the impossible. The flagpole cast a shadow. Not long, not normal, just a narrow line like a cut in the world. And it moved. Not with the moon, not with my light. It stretched towards me. I backed up, heart hammering, and the flag followed, bent not by wind, but by will. It dipped low, like a pointing finger, then rose again as if disappointed, or still deciding. I locked myself in the tower, turned off every light, waited, outside. The gravel shifted. I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling once, then twice. Then a third pass, but heavier, like someone else had joined. I forced myself to look. 2 shadows stretched across the clearing. Mine, and something leaner, narrower. It didn't follow my movements, just lingered. This morning. The air was still. No wind, but the flag was gone. The pole stood bare, humming louder than ever. In its place on the ground was a set of neatly folded clothes. My clothes, down to the stitch on my collar. They smelled faintly of cold iron and old pine. And beneath them, a note tucked into the boot heel you've already stepped aside. I don't sleep much anymore. The dreams are too specific. I see laps counted in reverse. I see the tower from above, a perfect spiral drawn in gravel around its base. I see someone watching from the flagpole, their face just out of frame, but always almost mine. My own shadow now bends a little when I walk past the pole, not fully, just enough to remind me it's still thinking, still weighing. Sometimes I wonder if the tower even exists anymore, or if it's just a memory on loop, a testing ground for something older than the rangers who've come and gone. I've found 27 logbooks in storage, none dated beyond this year, but all signed with the same initials E.R. One of them, the oldest, is written in a language I don't recognize, but my hands trace it with ease. I've stopped trying to count the laps. The ink on my forearm fades too fast now, and the shadow, when it appears, doesn't seem to mind who it follows, just as long as someone does. I've walked night patrols for most of my adult life, but it wasn't until I hit 45 that the dark started talking back. My name's Hugo Nance, and I've been with Bracken Light for 11 years, mostly solo shifts. Mostly fine. Nights out here are supposed to be quiet. Flashlight, radio check, thermal sweeps, routine stuff. But a few months ago, I started getting light returns. Not just reflections, responses. Like someone on the next ridge had a flashlight too. And they were mimicking my pattern, or beating me to it. The first time I noticed it, I was sweeping the South Gorge. Sent out 3 short beams, a common test pattern. Got 3 back, same spacing. I radioed dispatch, thinking it might be a poacher with gear. No one else was logged in the area. I moved uphill, thinking I could triangulate. The light responded again, closer this time. But here's the thing, the angle was wrong. It wasn't coming from the ridge. It was bouncing off a cluster of wet stone, maybe 15 feet ahead, but no one was there. Just that steady blink, waiting. I figured tech interference. Maybe a drone someone forgot to register. But when I got back to the truck, I noticed something odd. My flashlight felt heavier. Not by much. Maybe a few ounces. Enough that I checked the battery housing. Nothing inside had changed. But the grip was warm, like it had been absorbing heat all night. I logged the anomaly and told myself to get better sleep. You don't question the woods too fast, or they start offering answers. The second time it happened, I was halfway through a perimeter sweep around Miller's cradle, and my fingers started tingling. A static pulse, like holding a phone mid-call. I turned the light toward the tree line and blinked 3 times again. The return came instantly, but with a 4th blink added. My heart dropped. Whoever it was, whatever it was, they were leading now. I checked the log. No one else scheduled. All trails closed past midnight. I kept walking. Couldn't help it. The beam ahead of me grew faint, then vanished. But when I stopped, mine flickered without touch. That's when I realized my light wasn't following my hand anymore. It was moving just a hair faster than I was, as if anticipating me. I turned it off. The dark rushed in too thick, like the forest had been waiting to reclaim it. When I flicked the light back on, the trail had shifted slightly, subtle but wrong. The markers were reversed, and I felt something pinch my wrist, 3 cold dots, spaced like teeth. Back at base, I stripped down and checked my arm. Nothing visible. But when I pressed near the vein, a faint pressure pulsed outward, slow, methodical, like a second heartbeat. That's when the dreams began. Not nightmares, exactly. Just images of light tunnels made of flashing beams, spirals of torches moving like schools of fish. In one dream, I held my own light to my chest and felt it sink with something beneath the skin. I woke up drenched in sweat, the flashlight resting across my sternum. Warm again. I took it to the station tech, asked her to run diagnostics. She said the casing had micro-abrasions consistent with excessive handling, but the circuits were clean. Then she weighed it twice. Her brow furrowed. This model's supposed to be 1.3 pounds. She said, "Yours is 1.7. That's not battery weight." We cracked it open together, found nothing inside but the factory parts. But the housing wouldn't close the same way after, as if it no longer fit. The third signal came during a lightning storm. I wasn't even holding the light that time. It was on the desk beside me, off, untouched. The beam turned on by itself, just a blink. Then 2, then 3. I backed away. It didn't stop. The light swung gently, like it had been picked up, except it floated 2 inches off the surface without anchor. Then it flashed once, sharply, and dropped. I started recording everything. Video, audio, timestamps. But half the data corrupts within hours. I tried describing it in the logbook instead, but my handwriting slips halfway through and changes slope. Starts curling inward like I'm mimicking someone else's script. The last thing I remember writing was, "Am I the transmitter? Or just the receiver?" A page tore as I closed the book. When I reopened it later, the sentence had vanished, but the impression was still there, like it had burned into the paper without ink. That night I drove 30 miles out. Thinking distance would break the pattern, but at the trailhead of nowhere, deep into old growth, I stepped out of the truck and the flashlight clicked on again. Same sequence, same pull. And when I tried to drop it, it stayed in my hand like the weight had changed again, anchored now. Not to my body, to something deeper. I used to believe the forest spoke in wind and rustle. Now I think it speaks in signal. And the more I listen, the more I wonder if I'm even hearing it directly, or if something else is using me as a relay. I started marking down each time the flashlight behaved strangely. A running list taped above my bunk, just tally marks, times, and words like pulse, float, or return, after the 13th entry. The paper tore itself free from the wall during a windless night. I found it folded beneath my cot, tucked beside the flashlight I'd stashed in the locked storage case. The key was still around my neck. No signs of tampering. But the light had new scratches along the grip, forming 3 faint rings interrupted just where my fingers usually land. My skin changed next, not visibly, not to the casual eye. But when I brushed my forearm, the hairs lay flat like they were obeying some unseen magnet. Cold crept in not from outside, but from within, like the warmth was being siphoned out of me. I wore thermals, gloves, even added chemical warmers. None of it mattered. Each night I returned colder, but the light, it stayed warm. Sometimes I'd leave it off and still feel the heat humming through my hand, like something inside it was stirring in time with my heartbeat. The most recent patrol confirmed what I already feared. I followed a return signal deep into the western corridor, a place we don't map publicly due to terrain instability. The forest thickens there. Noise dies quick. My radio cut out 20 minutes in. But I kept walking, guided by flickers ahead. The pattern changed. Not SOS, not standard distress, this time. It blinked in clusters of 6. Then 1 paused. Then 6 again. I recognized it too late. That's not a light code. That's breath. Inhalation and exhalation. The beam was mimicking breathing. I turned to leave and found myself back at the same deadfall I'd passed earlier oak. Rotted through. Split with fungal growth I'd only seen once before. During a case in 09. That time. The missing hiker had described blue tunnels in the trees before she vanished for 3 days. When we found her, she couldn't speak, just held up her flashlight and wept. It stayed on for 2 days after, even without power. I hadn't thought about that case in years. But here I was, standing in the same rot, breathing in sync with a light I no longer controlled. That night, back at base, I left the flashlight in the shed, sealed under weighted bins. I locked the door, slept in the truck, still woke up with it in my hand. The logs showed no entries. The camera showed nothing. But the weight had shifted again. And this time, when I unscrewed the casing, a second lens had formed inside, nested like an eye looking back. I didn't scream, just stared. Because part of me expected it. Part of me was beginning to understand this wasn't just interference. This was implantation. I recorded one final log for headquarters. Didn't say much, just that I'd be taking a medical leave. Recommended for evaluation. But the audio came back wrong. I played it before sending. My voice lagged by a full second and warped at the edges. At the end of the clip, I heard something else layered beneath my own words, but spoken in a different tone. Lower, slower. I'm still here. Let me keep watching. That wasn't on the original file. I tried using a different light. Bought a brand new model from a store 2 towns over. Never brought it into the sector, left it in my glove box. First night, I reached for it. It wouldn't turn on. Not a battery issue. Just dead. And when I looked back at the glove box the next morning, it was gone. In its place was my flashlight. Still humming faintly, still warm. I didn't put it there. My dreams now take place entirely inside the beam. I walk down tunnels of light that bend around unseen corners, that vibrate slightly when I think of turning back. Sometimes I see others in the distance, shadows walking with no source. Each one holds a light. Each one mimics mine. Some are older. I recognize the shapes of ranger coats from decades past. Some wave. One spoke once, just once. He said, "We're not searching. We're signals. I no longer carry a compass. The beam bends true. And lately, it doesn't wait for me to follow. It leads. Dips down into ravines I don't recall logging. Points at trees with carvings I never made. Once it rested on a pile of stones beside the trail. A cairn I thought I'd passed without note. Until I saw my initials etched in the base. H.N. Not clean, but old, worn by years of weather. The stones beneath were warm, and the light pulsed steady, like a heartbeat. This morning, I submitted my resignation. Didn't wait for approval. Left my badge on the desk, but kept the flashlight. Not because I trust it, but because I don't think I can let go. My hand doesn't feel right without the weight. It's part of me now. Not a tool, a channel. I used to think the woods were watching. But now I understand. I'm the watcher. I was chosen to relay. And the light that called back, it never stopped. It's still calling. Only now, it calls from within. They say every ranger remembers their first solo trail. For me, it was Switch Elk Loop, 12 miles of elevation gain, switchbacks carved into shale, and a view that stretches all the way into Tennessee if the clouds behave. I was nervous, sure, but more than that, I was eager. I'd spent 6 months in training, passed every navigation test, hiked in worse weather than this. Still, the first thing I saw as I stepped onto the trailhead made my stomach turn. A single set of footprints in the damp earth, fresh. Nothing unusual, except they matched my boots exactly, down to the heel nick. I got 2 weeks ago, when I caught a rock on Staircap Bluff. I knelt to check them, thinking maybe I'd backtracked or someone else in the crew had similar gear. But the tread was too specific. The spacing, the weight distribution, it was me. Only I hadn't walked this trail yet. Not today. I radioed base for a quick check. Nobody else was on this loop. I shook it off, called it coincidence, and pushed forward. But within the first mile, the tracks were still there, always ahead, never behind. Like I was chasing myself through a story I hadn't written yet. I stopped at marker 7 to check my blood sugar and drink. As I knelt, I spotted something wedged beneath a rock off trail. My hat, the old Ranger issue cap I'd lost a month ago near Raven Hollow. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. No mildew, no dirt, just a dry sweat line and a faint smell of pine. I never hiked this far east with that cap. I don't remember ever being on Switch Elk before, not officially, but there it was, right where I hadn't yet arrived. The second hour was worse. I began noticing things out of sequence. A fallen branch I watched snap under my own boot now appeared unbroken half a mile later. A candy wrapper I'd stuffed in my pocket was lying beside the trail like I'd dropped it hours ago. I checked my GPS. The trail curled properly, but my dot jumped briefly, showing me near trail marker 10 when I was barely approaching 8. I stood in place for 15 minutes, just breathing, trying to get the rhythm of the world back in sync. Then I saw the prints again, still ahead. Still mine, but now they were dry. The dirt had already begun to flake around the edges. Older than me, older than now. The moment that broke my nerve was when I passed a fork I hadn't reached yet. On my map, it came at mile 9. I was still in mile 6, but the sign was there. Bear Run Overlook, 1.2 miles clear as anything. I checked my compass. North spun 3 times, then froze, pointing due west. I turned in a circle, hoping to find some sense of direction. But the trees had shifted. A birch that had been on my left was now growing from the right side of the trail. I marked it with my knife and walked 50 paces. When I turned back, there were 2 marks on the bark, both mine. I should have called it in, but something told me not to. Like speaking it aloud would anchor me deeper into whatever loop I'd stepped into. So I walked. Each time I turned a bend, I found more evidence I'd already been there. A note to myself scrawled on the back of a trail pamphlet, my handwriting. My shorthand. Don't turn around. I didn't remember writing it. I tucked it into my pack without reading it again, and I kept walking. The light began to dim too early. I checked my watch, still early afternoon, but the woods grayed like dusk had fallen. I lit my headlamp just as I crested a ridge and found something that shouldn't have been there. A smear of blood across a stone outcrop. Dry, rust-colored. I touched it and felt a pulse mine. And then the worst part beneath the stain. In the shallow dust were fingerprints, my size, my shape, dragged across the stone in the same direction I was headed. At camp that night, I made a ring of salt, something my grandmother used to do when she felt the old time pressing in. As she called it, I cooked, I journaled, I kept the fire close and my compass closer. At 2:13 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps around the tent. Light, measured, not animal, not panicked. I held my breath as they circled once. Then again, I unzipped the tent just enough to peek. No one there. But on the flap zipper, hanging like a charm, was the compass. Still warm, still spinning, and pointing straight toward my chest. I lay back and stared at the tent ceiling, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But a question had begun to gnaw at me. Simple and brutal. If I'm following myself, who's reaching the end? I left camp before sunrise, trying to outrun the feeling that I'd stayed too long in a place that didn't want me remembering. My pack felt lighter, though I hadn't changed its load. My legs ached like I'd already hiked the full loop twice. The trail ahead was familiar, but not from training or maps. It was that sick kind of familiar that creeps in when déjà vu overstays its welcome. I recognized the bend before I turned it, the fallen log before it came into view, even the shape of a bluebird wing tucked under a fern just off the path. That's when I noticed the footprints again. This time, they weren't ahead. They were beside me, mirroring each step in perfect tandem my tread, my stride, only reversed. I stopped. The prints stopped. I crouched and traced one with a gloved finger. It was my boot, no doubt. But the orientation was all wrong. Toe pointed toward me, like I'd just walked up from the opposite direction. I spun fast, trying to catch the other half of whoever was leaving them. Nothing. Just still air and birdless trees. I backed away and stumbled into the old hat again. Still clean, still dry, sitting where I hadn't left it. It felt like a loop trying to collapse in on itself, like I was being drawn into the center of something that didn't want me to leave a second time. I came upon a clearing near mile 10, a spot I didn't remember from any pre-trip briefings. The trees parted in a neat semicircle, and in the center stood a wood marker post blank, weather-worn, no trail name, no mileage, just a tall, smooth plank driven into the ground with a rusted bolt hammered halfway through it. The air was still, heavy, and I swear for a moment it tilted like the world had slipped off axis. That's when I saw the blood again, a fresh smear down the side of the marker, still wet, running in thin trails toward the base. I touched it, and it burned cold. Beneath it, half buried, was my missing knife, the same one I'd used to mark the birch. The blade was clean, too clean. I radioed base, static. Tried again. Nothing but the soft hiss of empty bandwidth. I turned off the device and looked up to find the trees had shifted again, no longer bending east, but wrapping inward, like ribs closing around a heart. I chose the only direction that looked untouched and ran. Didn't track my steps, didn't look back. I ran until I collapsed, lungs sharp, legs trembling. And when I looked around, I saw at my own camp, same ring of salt, Same half-burnt logs. But my tent wasn't there. In its place, a depression in the dirt, like something had been lifted carefully and removed. The sky stayed dim no matter the hour. The birds never returned. I stopped checking my watch. It spun in place, hour hand dragging like it was stuck between two times. I tore pages from my journal to mark the days, but each morning, they'd be back in the binding, fresh, blank, and warm like they'd just been printed. I tried writing warnings. Turn back. This isn't the first time. Don't follow the tracks. But by nightfall, the ink bled into the paper and formed new words. The same phrase. You are almost home. The next time I saw myself, it wasn't a reflection. It was me 30 feet down trail, walking in lockstep, same boots, same pack, face tilted just wrong, like it hadn't learned how to wear mine yet. She stopped when I did, blinked when I blinked, then smiled too wide. Too late. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, she was gone, but her scent remained. My shampoo, my sweat, and something else. Burnt wood and copper. I reached the last ridge by accident. The loop should have ended long before. But now I stood on a crag overlooking a valley I didn't recognize. No trails, no towers, just forest stretching into a blue that felt off-hollow, like a painted backdrop. At the ridge's edge sat my compass. The glass cracked. The needle stilled. Carved into the metal lid were words I'd not seen before. In my own handwriting, if I'm reading this. I'm behind. My breath caught. I turned slowly, afraid of what would be waiting. But it was just the wind. And the sound of footsteps. Coming first. I tried to leave the ridge, but every turn brought me back. The trees reset, the path repeated, and each time, a new item appeared: my scarf, my whistle, even a sketch I'd drawn years ago during training, all placed with care, all marked with red thread, like I'd left them as breadcrumbs for myself. And someone else had arranged them back into position. Each time I touched one, my fingers tingled like I was being plugged back in, like I'd been disconnected from something that wanted me complete again. Now I'm sitting at the edge of the clearing, journal open, fire burned low. I don't know how long I've been here. The air tastes the same, no matter the hour. The footsteps stopped an hour ago, or yesterday. But I feel her behind me, not moving, not speaking, just watching. I haven't turned around. I think that's the rule. That's what the notes were for. Because if I face her, if I see myself, one of us has to stop walking. And I'm not sure anymore if I'm the one who ever started. I didn't start hearing it until after the accident. A slip on the Western Bluff Trail. Bad weather, cracked ribs, and 2 days alone before rescue. People said I was lucky. I thought I was too. For a while, until the melody started. Not loud, just soft and low through the radio static on Channel 6, the one we used for inter-ridge calls. At first, I figured it was bleed-over signals can get weird in the hollers, especially near iron veins. But this wasn't random chatter or CB skip. It was a song, a woman's voice, old and tired, singing just beneath the noise. The first night, I heard it clearly. I was in my den with the portable radio, flipping through channels like I always did since retirement. Static, local news, weather alerts. Then a lullaby, slow and cracked like it came through an old Victrola. The lyrics made no sense. Ashes fold the hollow moon. Keep your lantern dry. Words I'd never heard before. But it felt familiar, like something I'd hummed once during fever or dream. I asked around, quietly. The younger rangers hadn't heard it. The older ones changed the subject. I tried to record it. Hooked the radio to a cassette deck and let it run overnight. What I got wasn't music. It was silence, punctuated by my own breathing. But I remembered the song. Not just the melody, whole verses. Don't cry for the morning birds. They never knew your name. I wrote them down, thinking maybe I'd find some trace in old local archives. I dug through newspaper clippings, ranger logs, even regional hymnals. Nothing. Until I found a reference in a 1957 incident report girl gone missing near Pine Hollow, left behind a journal. One line quoted, "The song won't stop unless I write a new verse." Same phrasing, same rhyme meter. The weirdest part. The frequency I heard it on, 138.7 megahertz, has no known transmitter anywhere near Oconee. It's off-band, not licensed, not part of any ranger spectrum. But it always came through between 2 and 3 a.m. Never earlier, never later. And the voice changed slightly each night. Always a woman. Sometimes soft, sometimes angry, sometimes barely more than a whisper. But the tune remained. Like it wasn't a broadcast at all. Like it was reacting to something. I played it for my daughter once. She said she didn't hear anything. But when I asked her to write what she felt, she jotted down 3 words: wet earth, candlelight, sorrow. I didn't tell her those same words appeared in my first ranger journal back in '84, written after a solo patrol I barely remembered. I don't think the song comes from outside the radio. I think the radio's just one way it finds you. A conduit. I stopped sleeping through the night, started walking trails before sunrise just to keep ahead of it. But it kept playing. Louder when I stood still, like it could hear my stillness. Then the lyrics changed. One night it said, "Amos, you know this part." That was the first time it used my name. And it was right. The next verse rolled from my mouth before I knew I was singing. I panicked, smashed the radio against the wall. The singing didn't stop. It hummed from the vents, the fireplace, the trees. I moved to a motel 2 towns over, but it followed me there too. I unplugged everything, wrapped my ears in foam. Still, it came. I wrote my own verse. Not a good one. Clumsy. But I sang it back, alone in the woods, hoping it would stop. It did. For 3 nights. Silence like I'd forgotten what breath sounded like. Then it returned with new lyrics. Your line is weak, but taken. The rhythm changed slightly. It wasn't a lullaby anymore. More like a work song. Low and heavy, like something being pulled up from the ground. I started finding symbols scratched into bark. Not carved, burned. Circles with cross lines. A curled sigil like a treble clef folded wrong. They matched the sketch in that girl's 1957 journal. I cross-referenced her name, Celia Ray. She was never found. Her file said she used to hum while walking, even alone. One of the search team members, now in his 90s, told me she was always listening to something no one else could hear. Now the song waits for me to fall asleep. It plays quieter when I fight it, louder when I drift. Sometimes I wake up humming. Sometimes I wake up somewhere else. Once I opened my eyes and was standing barefoot outside the old outpost, radio in hand, static hissing gently, like like a lullaby gone hoarse. I don't remember getting there. I don't remember leaving. The lyrics are changing again. I recognize names now. Rangers who vanished. Incidents long buried. And sometimes I think I hear my own voice harmonizing beneath hers. The melody pulls at something behind memory, like it's older than me, older than the land itself. And now, every night, it ends the same way, a single line. Clear as a bell over water. Did I really survive that accident? Or just become the next verse? I tried silence next. Not just no radios, no music, no phones, no background noise of any kind. I stripped my cabin to the studs. No fans, no hums, no whirring tech, just wind, birds, and breath. For 4 days, I heard nothing. Thought I'd broken the loop. Then came the 5th, just before dawn. I heard the chorus again, not through electronics, but through the trees. Leaves rustling in perfect rhythm, branches creaking like distant harmonies. And the wind, it carried a tune that shouldn't have been possible. 5 notes, rising and falling, matching the melody exactly. That's when I knew it had learned to sing through the woods. I packed up to leave the mountain for good. I didn't care if it followed me. I just didn't want to keep giving it verses. But as I zipped my pack, I found a page tucked into the side pocket, yellowed, torn, written in a shaky hand. It was my handwriting. But the date said 1958. The same year Celia Ray vanished. The words were familiar. Ashes fold the hollow moon. It was the second verse. One I hadn't written yet. One I was going to write. I held the paper so long, my fingers left sweat prints in the ink. I burned my old journals. Every page. I tossed the ashes off the ridge, hoping maybe they'd take the melody with them. That night, the song returned. This time, no words, just humming, close, too close, from under the floorboards. I didn't check. I just sat on the porch until sunrise, clutching the old field mic I'd found in the shed. It crackled once before the battery died. The sound it made wasn't static. It was breathing. My breathing. Played back like a sample caught years ago. I drove into town the next day and found the Historical Society closed. But one of the archivists met me behind the church to talk. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a weathered folder wrapped in twine. Inside was a single page of music notation, hand-drawn. Notes scrawled like they'd been copied from memory. At the bottom was a name, C. Ray. The archivist said the page had been anonymously donated in 1972, same year another ranger went missing near Oconee. Some people think the song's a call, she said, but I think it's a bridge. Something sings from one side and waits to be answered. The radio at the cabin doesn't need batteries anymore. It hums when I get close. The dial spins gently, even when it's off. I don't sleep much, and when I do, I dream of tunnels, not underground, but inside the melody, long corridors made of sound. And I walk them, barefoot, until I reach a door. Behind it, there's always a girl humming. She never turns around, but sometimes I think I hear her crying beneath the notes. And when I wake, I taste salt and ash. One evening, a young ranger knocked on my door, said she'd heard a strange melody near the old overlook, asked if I'd ever logged anything similar. I lied and said no. She started to leave but turned back to hum a bar of the tune. It was perfect. Same key, same broken cadence. I asked where she learned it. She shrugged. I think I've always known it. I've begun to hear other voices layered into the song. Deep, slow, tangled like roots. Male, female, young, old. I think every ranger who vanished is in there now. That's the real danger. It doesn't kill you. It keeps you, folds you into harmony. I've started marking the days with stones, just to keep time honest. But the stones move. Sometimes they hum. Last night, I gave in, sang it aloud. The whole verse, plus one line I didn't know I knew, let the next one carry light. I didn't write it down. I couldn't. The moment I finished, the radio went silent. First time in months. Not a whisper. Not a tone. I stood in that silence for almost an hour before realizing the porch had filled with fog. Thick, almost glowing. This morning, a new journal was waiting on my table, blank. Except for the first line, ashes fold the hollow moon. Same title, same ink, same paper weight as Celia's original journal. But the name on the inside cover wasn't mine. It said Ranger T. Lowe. I don't know who that is yet. But I think I will. The song may have left me, but the melody has only moved on. And maybe I didn't survive that fall after all. Maybe I've been a verse this whole time. And now, I'm just echo. I was assigned to Bitter Hollow to monitor fungal blooms and erosion patterns. But what caught my attention first wasn't the soil. It was the signs. They weren't part of any database. I could find plain wood planks, mounted on thin stakes, painted with the words, "Do not enter in," weathered red strokes. No standard format, no trail markers or departmental stamps. The strange thing was, their placement clustered deep in off-trail groves, usually near deadfall or crumbled stonework, places with no formal designation. I thought they were the work of an overzealous old ranger or a nervous local, until I pulled one out and found another in its place the next morning. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I missed one on the return hike. Maybe I'd circled by mistake. I made it a habit to take photos before and after each removal, timestamps, coordinates, everything. But each time, I took one down. A replacement appeared within 24 hours, always slightly different. Not just in wording, keep back, return by daylight, ground unsettled, but in material. One was carved into oak, one painted over driftwood, another burned directly into a piece of bone. No footprints nearby, no camera triggers, just the sign, staked upright and waiting. I reported it once, filed it under unauthorized installations. The response came back with a shrug, no record. No protocol breached. Nothing actionable. So I kept removing them. 1 week in, I found a sign nailed to a tree I'd sampled the day before. The bark was split in the same spot I'd cored for a fungal reading, but the nail was aged, rusted deep, and the paint already flaking. It shouldn't have had time to weather. I checked the sample ring I'd cut from the tree where I'd cored into the growth. The nail was embedded dead center, as if it had always been there. Then the dream started. The forest, flattened. The signs, towering like crucifixes, each with my name etched into the grain. I'd wake sweating, soil under my nails, pine sap on my wrists. I started wearing gloves to bed. The next day, I found a sign inside my survey tent. No wind damage, no tear in the mesh, just sitting there, leaned against my cot like a message. That one didn't say anything. Just had a symbol circular, like a coiled root or intestine. Burned so deep into the wood, it had left a scent of singed meat. I reached out to Amos Dill, the old ranger turned archivist, sent him a sketch of the symbol. He went quiet for a few hours, then called. Said the mark matched burial boundary warnings used by unnamed sects in the 1800s mountain dwellers who believed certain woods held unfinished spirits. They staked these symbols to keep the ground from waking. If you're seeing new ones, he added, someone's rest was broken. That's when I noticed something worse. The signs weren't just appearing. They were migrating, moving closer to my route, edging toward the paths I still needed to map. 2 weeks in, my notes started going missing. Not the full logbooks, just sections. Just the pages with sign placements. I started rewriting them. But the replacements felt off, like I was copying something from memory that wasn't mine. My handwriting slanted wrong. The ink bled strange. One page reappeared with a signature that wasn't mine. Just the initials LWW scratched over and over again along the margins. I found one scratched into my boot sole. I don't remember doing it. I stopped removing the signs and tried ignoring them, but they became harder to avoid now, marked with fresh earth, or laid with feathers, or ringed in antlers. One even hummed when I got close, a low vibrational drone that shook the air around my collarbone. That night, I opened my tent to find a circle of them staked around the perimeter, all facing inward. No paths out, no stars overhead, just wood and words and the quiet pressure of being watched. In desperation, I tried putting up a sign my own. Blank pine, clean font, marked official closure, fragile habitat. I set it by the ridge trail and checked it the next morning. It had been altered. Burned through the original text was a single line. You are the trespasser. I left it. I haven't touched another since. But the signs still come. I woke yesterday to one leaning against my truck. Not staked, just placed. Its words were in a language I couldn't read. The shape of it made my stomach ache. Now, the dreams are waking. I see places in the preserve I've never mapped, but somehow remember. Groves where the wind doesn't move. Stones that echo when I walk by. Moss that grows inward from bark instead of out. I've stopped using my compass. It spins even when I stand still. I mark my way with the string now. But even the string returns tied in knots I can't undo. Each day I stay, the signs change. They're not warnings anymore. They're instructions. I don't follow them. But I think I'm meant to. And each night, I hear a single tap on the door of my tent like a knock in reverse. Not someone asking to come in, but asking to be let out. I began to map them. Not the trails, the signs, every location, every variation in language, shape, my material, over time. A pattern formed, not a trail, but a boundary. A loose spiral tightening around a specific point in the southern ridge. Near a gnarled cluster of rock formations the locals call Cradle Hollow. The closer the signs got to that spot, the stranger they became. One was written on what looked like stretched hide. Another was etched in reverse on a polished metal shard. Each one pointed inward, like everything was converging. I hadn't intended to enter that space. But by the third week, the signs stopped showing up outside of it. They were waiting there now, staked in a perfect ring around an unmarked sink in the earth. I crossed the ring at dusk. Not to provoke, just to understand. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees in seconds. My breath fogged in the stillness. Inside the boundary, the air was thick, not with moisture, but with weight, like being underwater, but dry. I found a cairn in the center, stones blackened like they'd been struck by lightning. There were etchings on the rock, not words, more like instructions in geometry spirals, lattice curves, interlocking triangles that made my eyes itch when I stared too long. I touched the center stone, cold, pulsing faintly, not sound, not movement, just acknowledgement. That night, I didn't dream. I remembered memories I couldn't possibly have of staking signs in the dark with hands that weren't mine, singing low to the trees in a language that smelled like ash, burying pieces of bone at trailheads. I woke with mud beneath my fingernails and a new page in my notebook. One I hadn't written. Boundary thinning. Sleep below, it said. I burned the page. But the ash settled into a perfect circle on the tent floor. And the next morning, there was a sign beside me inside the tent again. Only this time, it said, "Welcome back." I stopped sleeping. I started hearing tapping during the day now, soft and rhythmic, as if the woods had taken up drumming. I kept hearing things too, my own voice calling from deep in the trees, sometimes humming, sometimes screaming. One afternoon, I followed the sound and found another ranger uniform. Not a body, just the uniform. Clean, neatly folded on a flat stone. It was mine. Every patch correct. My name tag. The field knife in the pocket had a smear of something red, not blood. Exactly. But old, sticky, familiar. I radioed HQ. Finally. I don't know what I expected, evac. Maybe reassignment. But the voice that answered wasn't one I recognized. It repeated my name 3 times, then said, "Containment not possible. You've already crossed." Then static. No matter how many times I called back, I got the same voice, same sentence, like it was an auto message meant just for me. I smashed the radio and hiked toward the preserve's edge. But every trail led me back to Cradle Hollow. Sometimes it only took 20 minutes. Other times, I walked all day. Still, I'd always end up stepping between the same circle of signs. I started building my own markers, stones and branches, simple patterns to test if the ground was resetting. They stayed for a while, then came back rearranged. One morning, my initials had been carved into a tree I'd never touched. Beneath it a date, 2 weeks ahead. I dug beneath the roots and found nothing at first. Then, deeper, I struck something hard. A sealed metal box, inside my own notebook. Every page I'd written, including the ones I'd burned, all still intact, all stamped with a single phrase across the top of each page, "Authorized return." Now the signs whisper. They don't have mouths, but I hear them. In the creak of trees, in the drone of insects. A constant mantra looping beneath the sound of wind. Put them back. Put them back. Put them back. I don't know who them is. Bone spirits me. I dug at the cairn again. Deeper. And found what I think was once a human jaw, cradled in stone and moss like a relic. When I pulled it free, the wind stopped. Entirely. The silence hit like a slap. And when I looked up, every sign was pointed inward again. Toward me. The last page of my notebook fills itself now. I've stopped fighting it. The words appear as I think them. Sometimes before, sometimes they answer questions I haven't asked yet. Today's message read, "You remove what guards. You open what should stay closed." I'm not sure I ever came here to survey erosion. I think I came because the boundary let me, or needed someone to undo it. I haven't left Cradle Hollow in days, or hours. Time folds differently here. Sometimes I blink and it's night. Sometimes I forget to breathe. But I keep finding new signs, older ones. Brittle, written in script I barely recognize but understand perfectly. They no longer say, "Do not enter." Now they say, "You belong here." And I think they're right. I came to Harker's Fen to study salamanders specifically, the elusive ridge-backed hellbenders that only surface in shallow water during certain moon phases. What I found instead was a trail that never dries. It runs along the fen's edge, winding just past the cattails and sinkholes. Always slick, always fresh, no matter the weather, rain or drought, frost or heat. The path glistens like something heavy just passed through. At first, I thought it was runoff from the nearby creek. Then I realized it curved against the slope, uphill, as if it wasn't made by water but dragging water with it. The prints are too wide for deer, too narrow for moose, and they don't fit any creature I've logged in my notebooks. Long, serpentine furrows, with intermittent dots like something limping on dozens of legs. The first time I followed it, I found nothing, just more wet ground and a cold feeling that clung to my calves like fog. But when I stepped off the trail, the ferns closed behind me. Not fast, not dramatically, just deliberately, like they were erasing my passage. Each morning, the trail reappears, fresh again, inching closer to my cabin, sometimes curling near my boot rack or beneath my workbench. I took samples of the fluid once. It wasn't creek water, too viscous. Under the microscope, it shimmered oddly irregular cells, pulsing like they were aware of being watched. I tried cataloging it as a biofilm, but when I returned to the slide an hour later, the sample had vanished, leaving behind a thin smear of green-black mold. And my fingertips, where I'd handled the glass, began to itch. That's how the patches started. At first, they looked like bruises, but darker, alive. They spread slowly, not like a rash, but like a map. A pattern creeping upward knee, thigh, hip each morning, a little more. Like the trail and I were mirroring each other. I didn't tell headquarters, just wrote it down in the daily log I keep hidden in the floorboards. The one that sometimes contains entries I don't remember writing. It moves when you're still. One of them reads, another says, "Don't sleep beside the damp." I started testing the trail's reappearance by placing small obstructions, sticks, cones, even trail cameras. The next morning, the obstructions were gone, cleanly, as if lifted and replaced elsewhere. One pine cone turned up in my bed. One stick was jammed into the wheel well of my ATV. The camera ruined, drenched inside, lens cracked, filled with the same mucus that coats the trail. I ran a chemical analysis, organic but unidentifiable. And somehow, willing, a month in, I caught movement on a thermal scope low to the ground, long, undulating, colder than the surrounding air. It paused just outside the fen's edge, then slipped beneath the surface without leaving a ripple. I checked the soil afterward, bone dry on either side. but the trail remained. Still wet, still leading forward, still waiting. I stopped following it. I started laying salt, but the salt turns to slime by morning. My tent zipper rusted shut overnight, and when I cut it open, the inside smelled like pond rot, like something had exhaled there, long and slow. My left leg is nearly covered now, not just with mold or bruising, but with texture, like bark or scaled stone. The dermis reads normal under biopsy, but I can't feel heat anymore, or cold, only pulses, rhythmic, steady, like the beat of a second heart deeper inside the muscle. I tried hiking out to the main station last week, but the trail was everywhere, splitting, branching, curling through places it didn't belong, places that should have been dry. Even the ranger maps began to warp lines smudging, ink blooming into water stains that moved when I looked away. The frogs don't come near me anymore. The hellbenders, once so elusive, started appearing at night, lining the trail like sentries, watching. Their eyes milky, gills flared, unmoving. One night I woke to find one inside the cabin, perched on my boot, completely still. It didn't blink. When I reached for it, it dissolved into damp earth. No trace, just a message scratched into the cabin wall behind my bed, in a language I shouldn't know but somehow understood. One word soon. Now I wear waders I don't remember owning. I carry gear that wasn't issued. My old boots are gone, replaced with something softer, noiseless. The trail no longer waits. It leads. And each time I try to turn back, I end up deeper than before. The water rising up my shins, my ribs, my breath. Sometimes I feel the pull, not just in my legs, but in my thoughts. Like my instincts are being rewritten. Like I'm being rerouted. I haven't seen another person in 17 days. The radio hisses with gurgling echoes I can't interpret. My reflection in the water is never quite right too long, too smooth. And sometimes it blinks when I don't. I log what I can, but my hands don't always obey. One page simply reads, "Am I doing my job?" or being led into something else's route. And this morning, I woke up already outside, on the trail, barefoot, wet to the waist, and smiling. I told myself I'd hike straight out. No detours, no samples, just one long walk west to the county road and whatever came after. But the trail wouldn't allow it. Every step I took seemed to curve gently back toward the fen, no matter how I corrected. No matter how far I pushed, the ground beneath me stayed soft, wet, glistening with that persistent sheen. I started marking trees with biodegradable tape, only to find the same markers ahead of me hours later faded, twisted into unfamiliar shapes. At one point, I found 3 tied around my own wrist, though I couldn't remember putting them there. The changes in my body became undeniable. What started as mottled texture now formed into branching filaments, black, thread-like veins just under the skin, pulsing with a rhythm I could no longer mistake for my own heartbeat. When I brushed against moss, it recoiled. When I stood near water, I could feel it rising, sensing me, like it was aware. My own movements grew slower, more deliberate, as if the air had thickened around me. And the amphibians began to follow. Not flee, follow. Dozens of eyes blinking in unison, tracking me from reeds, logs, even the waterline. They weren't watching. They were waiting. I opened my field kit one morning and found every page of my logbook soaked, The ink bled into dark coils that formed spiral patterns. I tried rewriting them, but my handwriting had changed rounder, slanted like script formed underwater. One page, written in that new hand, simply said, "Follow the wet." I flipped to the back cover and found another phrase etched into the binding: "Symbiosis requires surrender." That night, I felt the itch crawl up my spine and settle beneath the base of my skull. It pulsed gently, not painful, just patient. I started losing time. Short stretches at first, blinks, maybe. Then hours. I'd find myself knee-deep in bog with no memory of the walk. Once. I came to with both hands submerged in a shallow pool, fingers curled around smooth stones arranged in a perfect circle. I'd built something. I could feel the design humming under my palms, reacting to my presence. But the moment I stepped away, the stones sank out of sight, swallowed by the muck like they'd never been there. I tried setting fire to the edge of the trail once. Just dry kindling, a flare, desperation. The flames took for half a minute. Then the ground hissed back, steam rising so fast it seared my face. When the smoke cleared, the soil was untouched, but my boots were gone, and my feet were caked in that same glistening black film. It hadn't burned. It had replaced. I looked down at my reflection in the runoff. My eyes were changing irises, darkening, pupils stretching wide, even in daylight. I didn't look afraid. I looked resigned. The trail began looping tighter around the cabin, like a noose of wet roots. One morning, I stepped outside and found it circling the structure twice. A clean spiral leading nowhere. In the center, a hollowed log. Inside, my ranger patch, soaked, folded with care, beneath it. A single phrase carved into the bark: "You've been wearing it long enough." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there until nightfall, feeling the weight of the mold on my legs and the water in my lungs. Not drowning, just adjusting. I stopped checking the date. The sky hasn't changed in weeks. Clouded, heavy, colorless. The trail is with me now, inside my thoughts, coiling tighter each time I try to resist. I've started hearing the call, not out loud, but deep. A low vibration that hums in the hollow places of my body. It doesn't hurt. It invites. Some nights I wake to find frogs sitting in a perfect ring around my sleeping mat. Silent, blinking in rhythm. One blink, two. One blink, two. I left a final message on the cabin door yesterday. Scratched it into the frame with a flat rock, because nothing else would leave a mark. It reads, "If you follow this trail, it won't lead you back. It leads you deeper, until you forget what dry ever felt like." Then I stepped barefoot into the muck. No pack, no tools, just the song of the fen in my bones and a feeling that I was finally on the right path. Not a trail for mapping, not a route for rescue, a route for becoming. And now, the ground never dries beneath me, not because of the rain, but because I bring the wet with me, wherever I go. The compass showed up on my desk the morning after the storm. Brass-cased, heavy, the kind they haven't issued since the 30s. No note, no claim, just sitting there like it had always belonged to me. I asked around dispatch, supply, even checked the old retirement lockers. No one had ever seen it before. I opened the lid. The needle didn't point north. It swung slow, deliberate, and fixed on a direction between east and south, straight into the ravine. We don't patrol anymore. The inside of the lid was engraved in script so fine it looked like it had grown there: return on time, or never return. At first I thought it was a prank, one of the rookies trying to mess with the old man. But the more I watched it, the more it felt personal. Not in sentiment, but in memory. I couldn't stop touching it. And when I wasn't, I felt it pulsing faintly through the desk drawer like a heartbeat waiting for me to come back. That week, I found myself rerouting patrols toward the ravine. Told the crew we were checking for landslides, monitoring tree stress. But I didn't tell them the truth. That every time I held that compass, it pulled harder, like it knew something about me I'd forgotten. The first time I entered the ravine, I brought the compass in my pocket, half hoping it would finally go still. Instead, it began to vibrate faintly. Not enough to hear, just enough to feel through the threads of my jacket. The air got colder, not in temperature, but in time. Like I was stepping backward through something that didn't want to stay disturbed. I found a clearing near the center flat rock. Dry moss, a strange arrangement of stones in a spiral that had no center. Just a hollow space that refused to cast shadow. The compass spun once, then froze. I bent down, touched the stone, and I saw myself. Not in reflection, just a flash of a photograph burned into my head. Black and white, a group of rangers, 1932, lined up at the old trailhead, all unfamiliar, except one. Standing in the back, arms crossed, was a man who looked exactly like me. Same face, same scar under the eye, same eyes. I stumbled back, heart thudding. The compass needle snapped back to life, jittered, and then pointed deeper into the ravine. Into a part of the woods that hasn't existed on any modern map for decades. I asked dispatch for a copy of the 1932 Ranger rolls. Said I was working on a heritage plaque. Took some digging, but the file came back. There he was, Ranger T. Moss, assigned to the Lost Ridge Station, presumed missing during a blizzard. No recovery, no follow-up, no mention of family. The station log described his last entry as, "I've been where the map thins." There's something waiting at the edge. I didn't know what to do with that. I just stared at the page, the ink pressed into old parchment, and felt something slip in my gut, like a knot pulling tighter. The compass won't let me leave the region now. Every time I pack it away, the roads flood or the GPS glitches, or I find myself back at the ravine without remembering the drive. Once, I woke up parked at the trailhead with the engine cold and the compass clutched in my hand, though I swear I went to sleep at home. I started testing it, setting the compass on a table, watching the needle while I moved around. It didn't track true north, but it did move when I thought about specific things, memories, places, people, almost like it was listening for the direction I didn't want to go. I opened the station log one night and found a fresh entry in my handwriting, route reversed. Time realigned. Entry successful. But I didn't write it. Not consciously. The log was locked. The pen inside was dry. And the timestamp was exactly 3:17 a.m. Same minute, Ranger T.J. Moss recorded his last entry nearly a century ago. I checked the mirror above the door. For the briefest moment, I didn't recognize the man looking back. Not the lines, not the eyes. He blinked first. The next day, I found a new photograph pinned to the corkboard in the rec room. Recent. My team. Taken from the ridgeline. All correct, except there were two of me. One standing with the others, one half visible behind a tree, just enough to see the outline. The same compass gleamed in both hands. Nobody admitted to taking it. Nobody even saw it before I did. I took it down and burned it in the furnace. But it was back the next morning, tucked into my field log, unburned. The fire hadn't even touched the paper. Now, the compass never stops moving, not spinning, searching. The engraving inside has changed, too. New line beneath the old one. You've crossed your own trail. I don't remember writing that, but I believe it. I haven't told the team about the photo, the compass, the man who looks like me. I want someone else to carry this weight, even if just for a minute. But each time I try, the words dissolve before I speak them, like my voice isn't authorized to share certain truths anymore. I watch them gather around the campfire or check gear on morning rotations, laughing, living in a timeline I'm no longer sure is mine. I still wear the patch, still sign the reports. But I think the man who started this loop never made it back. I think I'm just what's left an echo walking the same ground with new boots and borrowed breath. The compass now clicks softly when I pass trail markers, as if acknowledging memory. Once, I held it near a forgotten overlook, the place where Ranger T.A. Moss supposedly vanished, and the needle bent. Not pointed, bent, toward a gap in the trees that hadn't existed the day before. I stepped through, and the temperature dropped instantly. The world turned gray, not dark, absent. Time stuttered. I could hear birdsong, but no birds. Wind, but no movement. At the center of the clearing stood a cairn I'd never seen on any survey map. No plaque, no trail marker, just 7 stacked stones and a rusted nameplate at the base. The nameplate read, "Re-entry failed." I reached for the compass and found it gone. My pockets empty, my chest hollow. I turned fast, eyes darting, breath rising. That's when I saw the second cairn behind me, smaller, fresher, and on it a patch from my own uniform. The same one I'd lost 2 months earlier in a flash flood rescue. I stood between them, one past, one present, or maybe future. I don't know anymore. The compass was back in my hand when I turned around, its needles slowly circling like it hadn't made up its mind yet. Neither had I. Dispatch still calls once a week for regional reports. I give them clean logs, flat terrain assessments. They don't ask questions. But last week, the voice on the other end changed mid-sentence, shifted tone, lost its inflection, then said, "Clear as anything, time code verified, trail convergence acceptable." I ended the call, smashed the handset. The next morning, it was back on the wall, rewired and working perfectly. I asked the oldest ranger I could find, a man in a hospice 3 towns over, retired 30 years, half forgotten, when I mentioned the compass. He went pale and said, "That thing doesn't tell you where you are. It tells you where you should have stayed." He died 2 nights later. Natural causes. But I keep hearing his voice when the wind cuts across the ravine at night, whispering that same warning again and again, not angry, just tired. I opened the compass yesterday to find something new beneath the lid. Not just the engraving. A photo, folded tight and thin, slipped beneath the brass plate. It showed the overlook from above, taken from a height no one could reach on foot, And at the center, small but clear, stood a figure. Me, not facing the camera, facing away, walking toward the cairn. The timestamp printed at the bottom read, August 3rd, 2032. 7 years from now. Same date as Ranger T. Moss's final patrol, down to the hour. I keep hearing the phrase in my head now. Waking and sleeping, you crossed your own trail. And I've begun to understand what it means. Not time travel, not haunting, overlapping. The ridge isn't just elevation, it's a fold. A compression of footsteps walked too many times by the same soul. And the compass isn't broken. It's calibrated to the moment I made the wrong decision. And each day, I stay here. It's trying to take me back. Back to that single moment when I could have gone left instead of right. When I could have never found the ravine at all. I stood at the station mirror this morning, just long enough to see my reflection blink out of sync again. Just once. A small delay, like it was hesitating to mimic me. I don't think it was mine anymore. I think it was his. Or mine from before. I watched it closely, waiting. It smiled. I didn't. The compass hasn't stopped vibrating since last night. A steady hum that syncs to my pulse. Or maybe my pulse has synced to it. I don't check the maps anymore. I follow the needle, and as I walk, I hear the footsteps behind, ahead, within each one leading me somewhere older than trail markers, older than names. I think I'm heading back. Or maybe I've always been heading back. Because in the end, the path doesn't loop. It spirals.